Hebrews chapter 11 can be viewed as a modern documentary. It could be thought of as members of a faithful family who are tracing their heritage and the ancestors of the family. This chapter can also be thought of as a Hall of Fame. It tells the story and major achievements of the saints that went before us. And these saints were primarily in the Old Testament. The chapter describes how the ancestors persisted and survived throughout the years. These are our godly faith mentors who should be imitated. They have much to teach us about our faith. They are gifts that can help inspire our faith when we need a little encouragement. But ladies and gentlemen, I want to approach this chapter from the perspective of a tour. So I call it the Hall of Fame Faith Tour. And I will be your guide, as well as your narrator, throughout this tour. I trust that you will enjoy the visit. If there's anything I can do to make your tour more rewarding, please let me know. Do not hesitate. But before we start the tour, let me set a few ground rules so that it will make our tour and our visit more meaningful. First, I request that at all points of the journey, you remain together as a group. This is not a journey to be traveled alone. There are some risks along the way, and occasionally you will be tested. However, I believe that if you pay careful attention and trust yourselves and each other, we'll all get through this together. Second, I ask that you, as your guide, that you pay attention to my instructions at all times, as well as my direction. And also that you entrust your guidance into my care. At times, my assistance may seem puzzling, even aggravating, but I assure you that I only have your good intentions and well-being in mind. Okay, so having given you these simple instructions, I hope that you will have a highly and very informative encounter. So, without any further ado, now, ladies and gentlemen, let's head to our first destination. We have arrived at our first faith stop. Is everybody comfortable? Does anybody need any water? Okay. I know it's a little dark in here, but I promise you, that is all part of the Faith Hall of Fame tour. You will appreciate it more fully as the tour continues. In the left-hand corner here is the first display. It is one of the finest examples in the entire tour. Here at the Faith Hall of Fame, we believe in starting and stopping with the absolute best. We also believe that the opening sets the stage or the example for the rest of the tour or items that follow. Okay, so the opening scene, ladies and gentlemen, is the formation of the universe. It's okay to gasp in amazement. It's all right to be astonished at this remarkable and spectacular sight. It is an impressive spectacle. Here, you have order made out of chaos. Life begins ex nihilo, or creation out of nothing. What is seen is made seen. What is seen is made from the unseen. Okay, we could stay here all day, but we got to keep moving. There's other things we need to see. On your right, you will notice the respected figure of Abel. Now, you may be wondering, how did Abel stay so physically fit? Abel's physique is well sculpted indeed. I'm guessing that it's probably due in part to the rugged life of a shepherd. Speaking of shepherds, you will also notice his flock. They are healthy and appealing to the eye. They look as if they have grazed on lush green pastures, and they look also as if they are well taken care of. And they are Abel's offerings to God. Abel offered his finest sheep as an act of reverent worship. But in one sense, Abel's story is heartbreaking. For I believe that you all know that Abel was killed by his brother Cain. Cain killed him in an act of jealousy, fury, and rage. Abel was so young. He never received what was promised. But he did. I assure you, he did. Heartbreak was not the final word of Abel's story. God himself gave approval to Abel's gifts, and he received a great inheritance. Now, if you follow your neighbors once more, we will continue along the tour. You have probably realized by now the importance of our initial instruction. The journey is one in which we should not go on our own. You can attempt to do so if you like, but I'm afraid you might become utterly lost and stumble without direction in the darkness. This is one of those experiences which we should complete together. Once again, I am sorry that I am not able to turn on the lights. I would if I could, believe me, but I can't. I know that your trip would be considerably more pleasant, but I'm afraid there are not any lights. It is the nature of the journey. The trip must be taken in darkness. Now, if you turn again to your right, you'll notice Enoch. Enoch is the only member of the Faith Hall of Fame who did not taste death. Now, there is a legend, and I must admit to you that it's purely fictional. The story goes that one day, Enoch and God went for a walk. And they walked, and they walked, and they walked. It was an extra long walk. And then God said to Enoch, "You are a long way from home. You had better come in and stay." And so Enoch went, and he stayed. Let me say it again. It is only a fictional story, but it appeals to me. And I can see that it appeals to some of you as well. I think it does because we know that God was pleased with Enoch, and that is one of the reasons that Enoch is in the Hall of Fame. Now, if you follow me once more, and remember the instructions, it is important that we stay together at all times, and keep your sight firmly directed on the person in front of you. You were asking, why is the journey done in darkness? And that is a good question. The reason this journey is traveled in darkness is because the navigation of the faith of our forefathers required it. These Faith Hall of Famers firmly believe that the trip is one which can only be experienced by faith. Now, if you look behind you, I am sure that you will instantly recognize this person. Why, it's Noah. Now, for those of you who are feeling a little silly right now, you can probably relate to Noah. You can appreciate Noah's dilemma. God instructed Noah to build an ark and to save his family from the flood. But here's the issue. Noah lived in a landlocked country. I am sure that we can imagine how ridiculous he felt in the face of the jokes, the jeers, and the taunts of his neighbors. But that is the reason why Noah is in the Hall of Fame, because he respected God's directions, even when he labored and it made no sense. Okay, we better move on. Our time together is slipping away. We are now leaving this room and heading for an unknown destination. We are beginning a whole new phase of the journey. No, I'm sorry, I cannot make out the faces in the darkness, or nor can I understand the voices. But I do not recommend that you turn back at this point. I do understand how difficult this must be for all of you, believe me. But once the journey has begun, I do not recommend that you turn back. Can I suggest that you simply take it one step at a time? Remember the instructions. If we all stick together and if we carefully follow the directions, we will be transformed by the whole experience. On your left, you see the patriarch Abraham. Now, this station is one of my favorites. If you do not mind me expressing my opinion, it is one of my personal favorites. Abraham looks so dignified and stately, almost gleaming, you could say. And why shouldn't he? You will also notice Sarah and Isaac. I like this scene. It is a family setting. It is a wonderful scene. It portrays, in my opinion, the extraordinary nature of this whole episode. Abraham and Sarah were quite advanced in years. We can easily imagine how hard it must have been for them to believe their promise. Notice how differently they look compared to others that are in the Faith Hall of Fame. I believe it is because they lived their whole lives as foreigners in a strange land. They lived as people on the move. They lived as people on the way to something else. They were constantly looking, waiting for the land God had prepared and promised them. Next to them, you will notice another rather disturbing scene. It's Abraham in the land of Moriah offering Isaac as a burnt offering to God. I must admit, I always feel a little uncomfortable with this particular scene. Now, don't get me wrong, I know that it was only a test and that sacrifice was not God's intention. But still, it sends a shudder down my spine and makes me feel just a little uneasy. And I believe that that is precisely the reason Abraham is in the Faith Hall of Fame, because he trusted God even when God's request defied human reason. In fact, if you take it at face value, the request seemed to jeopardize the very promises that God had made to him. But we can't hang around here too long. We need to continue. If you look over to your left again, you'll see the figures of Isaac, Jacob, and Esau. Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau in regards to their inheritances and their futures. But now I ask you once more to carefully listen to my instructions. We are about to approach a series of difficult steps. I know it will be quite difficult in the dark, so I stress the need for extreme caution. We will go down slowly. Please take your time and be very careful. One slip could be very severe. But on your right, you will notice Joseph. You are aware, of course, that Joseph was sold by his brothers into slavery in Egypt. It is difficult for us to imagine the despair that Joseph must have experienced and the loss of basic human freedom. Yet, God gave Joseph wisdom that was so extraordinary that his fame spread throughout the earth. His wisdom enabled him not only to survive in Egypt, but to thrive. And he was promoted to a position of great influence in the land. However, I believe that Joseph's most significant accomplishment was believing the promises that God had for him and the nation of Israel. He embraced this vision that God would free Israel from Egyptian slavery. Now, he did not see it come to fruition because he died in Egypt, but he believed the promise, and his relatives experienced its fulfillment. Again, I must warn you that the next section becomes quite difficult. It is very steep, and it will test all of us. I urge you to take it slowly and to remember your instructions. I will go ahead of you at a manageable speed. Trust me, I will safely lead you through it. You see, another one of my favorites. We have a whole series of events right here in this section. But every time I visit this station, I am saddened. It is almost as if I can hear the cries of weeping mothers ringing throughout these halls. Perhaps you can feel it too. These innocent children, infant boys, were executed in a cruel form of population control. In modern terms, I believe it would be called ethnic cleansing. It was an evil act of cowardice by a king, frightened and threatened by a growing Jewish population. Nevertheless, at a final attempt by Moses' desperate parents, eager to give their son a chance at life and willing to trust God to protect him, they disobeyed Pharaoh and hid Israel's promised deliverer. Moving along, we see Moses as the leader, and he was a great leader, a man of principle. It would have been very easy for Moses to remain in the royal palace and to live his life surrounded by the luxuries of Egypt and ignore the predicament of his people. But Moses followed God's command obediently, and he left a life of comfort and privilege to become the leader of the Jewish people. You will notice Moses again in the final two scenes of the tour. First, leading the children of Israel through the Red Sea, then guiding them through the wilderness. Now, the wilderness years were very hard years. Moses' ability as a leader was challenged and tested severely during that time, as well as his patience. The Israelites complained bitterly that God had led them out into the desert to die. There must have been many times when Moses was tempted to give up, but he knew that the promised land awaited them. Though he only saw it from a distance, he never gave up hope that one day the children of Israel would enter it safely. Okay, we must continue. Time is slipping away. On the right, you will see the walls of Jericho, or better yet, the remains of the walls of Jericho. Over there is the portrait of Rahab the prostitute. Now, Rahab's faith in God was so extreme that she put herself at risk. For she would have been executed as a traitor if her trust in the Hebrew spies were proved to be incorrect. Okay, I'm afraid we're badly behind schedule. I'm sorry, and it's my fault. I stayed too long at the beginning. So now we only have a time for brief glimpses at the remaining scenes of the tour. Over there is Gideon and Barak and Samson and Jephthah and David and Samuel. Slightly to the right of them are the prophets. There is Daniel, who shut the mouths of lions and quenched the fury of fiery furnaces. Over there are the women who have received back their dead and who was raised to life again. Look, over there are those who faced taunts and jeers and experienced beatings. Keep looking over there, and there are those who were stoned and were sawn in two and put to death by the sword. But again, see those who went about in sheepskin. They were persecuted and mistreated. All of these heroes are complimented for their faith. That is one of the reasons we honor them in the Faith Hall of Fame. They were all sure of what they hoped for and certain of what they did not see. All of them are celebrated for their faith, even though none of them received what had been promised. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I would like to thank you for your company. I'd like to thank you for your patience as we toured the Faith Hall of Fame. And I want to give kudos for your willingness to have faith in yourselves and to have faith in my care and direction. On your departure, you will find refreshments and a recreation area. Please make use of the facilities, relax, and enjoy the stillness before you depart. For this is the end of the Faith Hall of Fame tour, but not the end of our expedition. I am sure you have already made the discovery for yourselves that we are all participants in this tour. We're not merely spectators. Their stories are our stories. Their experiences are our experiences. These are gifts to reassure us of the promises of God. Please rest a while and gather your strength, for as you leave this hall, the journey will continue in your own life and experiences. Faith will often be required. Tenacity will be needed in some days. But always remember, the God who controls the universe, the unseen Lord of heaven and earth, has made promises to us regarding the future. Promises that are sealed in the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. It is a definite promise that gives us reasons to live in the future. God has promised, and God will deliver. We are encouraged not to throw away our confidence because or when the going is difficult, but rather to continue. For in God's time and in God's way, we will receive what God has promised. Divine promises will be fulfilled. Nothing or no one can thwart God's plans. Amen.